Let's bring in the front bench panel to talk about the dynamics of that. Joining me this evening, former Nova Scotia Premier Stephen McNeil. He's now a strategic business advisor for the law firm Cox & Palmer in Halifax. Former Alberta MLA and Cabinet Minister Gary Mar. He's the president and CEO of the Canada West Foundation now. Former Communications Director to Jagmeet Singh, Melanie Richer, is here. She now works at Earnscliffe Strategies. And CTV National News Ottawa Bureau Chief Joyce Napier rounds out our panel. Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Gary, I'm going to start with you. We spoke with Kenny Chiu, who was defeated out in BC in the last election. Says CSIS actually reached out to him, but he is hoping that the federal government, kind of in his words, take this more seriously. Do you think that that is a genuine ask?
Well, look, let me say, first of all, here in Canada, we're accustomed to lots of things being made in China, but election results shouldn't be one of them. And I think that Mr. Chiu has a legitimate issue to raise. The Prime Minister has talked about how the overall interference didn't really impact the general election results, and there's 338 ridings in the country, but has not the electoral will of the electorate been subverted in the case of somebody like Mr. Chiu? I don't think that this is a partisan issue. I think that all politicians and all parties should be concerned about learning about what happened when the information came forward and how it was used, because the idea of pushing this under the rug and saying there's nothing to see here just doesn't seem to be a very satisfactory approach to dealing with the issue of ensuring that not just the overall election result was okay, but that it was appropriate results in each of 338 ridings.
Joyce, what the Prime Minister has said so far is basically there's been no information presented to him to give him reason to believe that the outcome of the election was determined by this interference. The point that Gary's making and that Mr. Chiu made is that there's kind of a lot of room in between there, right? Like the outcome being determined, but also there being some sort of role of China in the process, and that in and of itself being a problem. Do you think if the Prime Minister sort of sheds some more sunlight on all of this, it diffuses the political nature of it, or is this going to be partisan no matter what?
I think this is going to be partisan no matter what. We're in Ottawa, and I think everything turns into partisan. I think there's two different stories here. There is the way the Prime Minister is dealing with it. There's his communication strategy, which is basically no communication here. No, you got to trust me, everything's fine, nothing to see here. But every day we see that there are things to see here. You know, the document, the CSIS document that the Globe and Mail has seen that we haven't seen, so it's difficult for us to judge, but we take their word for it. There are things in that document that I think are worth seeing, and, you know, the Prime Minister seems to be telling people, just trust me, but it's difficult to do because we don't know what's going on, and the trouble is he doesn't seem to either know what's going on. Is he being informed about what's going on? Is the government taking this seriously? Is it because there are reports in the media and also words from the opposition that the Prime Minister is speaking? So, you know, there's a strategy here that is failing, and they should get ahead of it, get a bit of transparency, show us that something is being done, the public, right, and show the Chinese that Canada is reacting. Is Canada having conversations with the Chinese? Are there any questions being asked of the Chinese? Is there anything that the Prime Minister can share so that people don't doubt? And when you leave room for doubt, is when you have lost the communication game.
Stephen, could the Prime Minister, do you think, be more forthcoming? And second part of the question, he's sort of saying to the opposition, don't be too partisan about this because that will amplify China's case too.
Well, I don't know what the Prime Minister knows, so I think this is one of those cases, whatever he knows, whatever anyone knows should be put out in the public. Be specific about what is happening, because more importantly than, and Joyce is right, you're here in Ottawa, you don't have to be in Ottawa, you can be in any one of our capital cities, it'll become partisan pretty quickly. But I think more importantly, we want to make sure that it doesn't undermine the confidence of Canadians in our elections system. I mean, there's already, we're watching south of the border, we're seeing what's happening in other places around the world, the lack of confidence in elections. I think the last thing Canadians need is to have their confidence undermined in this. So the way to prevent that is to be specific about what you know, and to have our intelligence agents show up at a committee, which I hear they're going to be doing, and laying out what they know when they knew it, and then we can all make our own mind up about whether or not the government has been forthright at this point.
What will be interesting to watch, and Stephen makes a good point, Melanie, about the committee that will now expand the scope of investigation to include 2021, is that so far those parties, for example, the ministers that oversee this or CSIS, have been there, but not been what one might describe as forthcoming, right? Some of the information is obviously covered by national security concerns, but a lot of questions were asked and not a lot of answers were given. I wonder if that will change given the kind of amplified level of scrutiny right now on the issue.
Well, I think, like others have said, a balance is required. We don't obviously want to put too much information out there that bad actors could use that information, but at the same time, Canadians need to be reassured that the strength of our democracy is protected, that the process is transparent, that things are being done to protect that and to stop that interference from happening. The interesting thing about committee is what we've seen so far is like the Conservatives always do, they kind of turn this into a little bit of a circus. They have a list of 1 million people that they want to come testify. None of it is going to actually get to the matter of the issue to get transparency for people. So
I mean,
the
ministers and the head of CSIS will be important to hear from.
Absolutely, absolutely. But the rhetoric that we're really seeing here is not helpful. People need to know that our election was a fair election. What we're seeing in the States is not helpful to protect our democracy here. So the inflaming of that rhetoric for the Conservatives' own good, I don't think is helpful. What I will say is there are thoughtful ways to do that. We've seen at other committees that, there was a judge that brought in and the committee members were able to see the documents in private instead of just being given documents that are striked out of all the information. So there are thoughtful ways to do this, that we can get to the information, can be transparent for people without putting really future elections at risk.
Yeah, the U.S. example that both you and Stephen highlight, I think is an important. We've seen what happens when people don't believe the outcome of an election, and it isn't pretty. So sunlight is important in this case.